Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the muck of 14th century Europe's nastiest contagion because nothing says sweet dreams like the cloying stench of festering wounds and riverbanks slick with refuse. You'll feel the grit of mud caked under your nails as you tiptoe past plague pits where the ground sighs with every shifting corpse. Imagine the taste of vinegar-doused gruel that does nothing to mask the sour tang of fear in the air. We'll unpack the absurd cures made from ground-up toads and ritual smoke that turn town squares into medieval fog machines, so cringe-worthy you'll thank the heavens for your own pillow. After that, we'll chart the plague's VIP express route from port to port, unearth bones like uninvited house guests, and peek into gilded quarantines where nobles believed silk robes were a force field. Spoiler, they weren't. Expect wry commentary sharper than a tanner's knife and enough ghastly surprises to keep you half aware under the covers. So smash that like button and subscribe, because misery's more fun with you here. You awake to the acrid tang of spoiled porridge lingering in the wooden bowl you left on the table overnight. Mud clings to your ankles, and the stale breeze from the river carries a pungent brew of livestock waste and human refuse. The first taste of daylight is a gulp of sour ale that stings your throat and does nothing to banish the oppressive odor of decay. Every inhale feels like swallowing rotten fruit and burnt hair, a cocktail that assaults your senses without mercy. Even the fresh herbs you mangle into your morning gruel can't override the rank haze that drifts through the alley. As you raise a chunk of stale bread to your lips, you detect a metallic undertone promising it will sit heavy in your belly. The wind shifts, and you catch the fleeting whiff of old blood mingled with rotting upholstery in a nearby tavern. Tiny insects burrow through cracks in your sleeve, reminding you that your fur-lined coat doubles as a flea playground. In this realm, every meal is a gamble, every breath a test of endurance, and every shudder a reminder that survival is a messy business. You pinch your nose and force down another spoonful of thick gruel whose flavor has curdled into something nearly unrecognizable. The baker's crusty loaves emit a yeasty perfume promising freshness, only to reveal a chalky interior that grates against your teeth. Beneath the faint aroma of overcooked onions, you detect the stale scent of damp straw dragged into the kitchen from the fields. With each swallow, you envision the roots of trees sinking into foul soil, drawing up toxins that end up in your belly. You swab your tongue with watered-down wine, hoping to erase the lingering tang of fear palated by every villager you pass. Around you, carts rumble over cobblestones, slick with animal droppings and yesterday's market offerings left to fester. The clatter of wooden wheels masks the low moans drifting from the makeshift infirmary at the far end of the street. A sudden gust carries the sharp sting of vinegar from a merchant's barrel, slicing through the miasma with surprising clarity. Between every stench and every grimace, you inch forward on wounded hope, relying on rancid rations and battered resolve to keep going. A vendor tosses you a handful of stale cheese, its crumbly texture releasing a tang that curls your lip. You dip a rag into that spare vinegar to freshen your collar, though it replaces one foul scent with another. The tavern keeper offers honeyed mead, but its sweetness only highlights the underlying musk of mold. Even the herbalist's pungent salve, meant to ward off disease, reeks of bruised garlic and crushed nettles. You hold your breath as you navigate past open drains where water pools black and viscous. The sun glints off rotting fruit tossed into the gutter, its skin split open to reveal maggot-riddled interiors. A passing child thrusts a chunk of bread at you, promising satiety, but delivering a sour punch to your tongue. A stray rat scuttles across your path, proof that even vermin find this place unbearable. Smell and taste dominate every moment of this day, each flavor an unwelcome reminder that plague lurks beneath the sweetness. You scorch your tongue on nettle broth, intended to ward off chills, only to feel the bitter sting linger. The fine scent of crushed rose petals meant to soothe the spirit quickly yields to the underlying reek of dying livestock. A spice cart rattles by, cinnamon, clove, and star anise, but even they can't outgun the pervasive aroma of rot. You clutch a cloth over your nose as you pass the butcher's stall, where the coppery tang of fresh blood rivals the stench in the air. Sweat trickles down your spine, mingling with the fetid atmosphere to create a slick you can almost taste. You recall the apothecary's promise that bathing in wine might purge infection. Absurd, but tempting in desperation. You imagine scrubbing your skin with the fermented juice, until your arms prickle with warmth and relief. In a fleeting moment of dark humor, you wish for a medieval antivirus to scan away both bugs and blight. Your tongue burns, lungs ache, and you realize that no amount of sour remedies can cleanse the stench of impending doom. A cart of vinegar sprays a fine mist into the air, momentarily sharp enough to clear your nostrils. You pinch your nostrils and lean into the feeble breeze, seeking a breath of air untouched by disease. The lingering taste of bitter almond in your mouth brings to mind whispered warnings about poisoned wells. You swish a final mouthful of vinegar as a makeshift disinfectant, grimacing as its sour bite coats your teeth. Even the flicker of torchlight seems infused with acrid smoke that leaves ash on your tongue. You regret not learning a modern concept like hand sanitizer centuries earlier. Despite the sensory assault, you press on through the oppressive gloom, determined to outlast the rot of both earth and body. By the time you pause for air, your senses are so overloaded that even the faintest hint of fresh linen feels miraculous. Now that's breakfast with a side of existential dread. Your day truly begins when the mayor's herald tromps through your street, bellowing that any sick neighbor must be reported immediately. A cluster of townsfolk gathers, wary eyes darting as officials in threadbare cloaks scribble names into grimy ledgers. You sense power here in ink and parchment. A signature, and you're tagged for isolation until further notice. The magistrate, perched in his rickety balcony, surveys his subjects like a farmer picks through wilted cabbages. His voice booms down, promising harsh fines for anyone caught harboring coughs or fevers, penalties that could strip you of your only goat. A group of merchants quietly bribes a guard to look the other way. Their pockets bulge with silver slips purchased on borrowed hope. You glimpse the effigy of the city's wealthy patrician, gilded crest, shining faintly even through layers of soot and fear. Street wardens clad in patched tunics enforce curfews, striking your door with a blunt staff if you overstay your allotted hours. Here, survival hinges on the whims of scribes and sword-bearers, where a misplaced coin or careless cough could seal your fate. You hurry past a caravan of merchants escorted by armed watchmen, an entourage that commands both clearance and contempt. A veiled woman in velvet hisses orders to her servants, her scroll detailing ransom amounts for any health certificate. Rumors swirl that the local noble has secured safe passage across the bridge, for a price, of course, creating jealousy among commoners. You swallow hard, recalling the time you traded your best cloak for a single health pass and a promise of mercy. Behind closed shutters, wealthy families hold secret banquets, flaunting laughter that echoes louder than church bells. The city council convenes in the great hall, candlelight dancing on faces etched with worry, each member vying to shift blame. You imagine the hush that falls when a councilman's quill scratches across parchment, cold strategy in ink. A palace guard strides by, glancing at the beggars enlisted as street sweepers, living proof of the stark divide. Authority here is a double-edged sword, meant to protect but often sharpening the gap between silk sleeves and threadbare coats. You overhear a baker muttering about special flour shipments reserved for the elite, while the rest scrape crumbs from stale rations. The local priest, fingers stained with ink, blesses quarantine orders but pockets a secret share of tribute offerings. City watchmen confiscate simple vinegar cures, redirecting them to the infirmary where only the privileged can access a drop. You notice that even the once relied upon town bell tolls only for those of rank, leaving common deaths unheard. Merchants whisper about forging health seals, tiny stamps that can open locked gates but require an enemy to turn a blind eye. A cloaked figure trades information with a guard captain, their hushed bartering more valuable than any grain. You feel the pulse of power in every closed door, every guarded gate, and every whispered transaction. The governor's decree hangs on every wall, an ominous reminder that law and fear march hand in hand. In this shadowy theatre, you're both actor and audience, caught in a performance scripted by those in high towers. You witness a street surgeon accepting gold coins to write false recovery reports, granting escape from quarantined quarters. A carriage draped in velvet glides by, carrying a noble's daughter rumoured to be immune, her carriage emblazoned with royal colours. Servants scramble ahead to clear a path, and you sense each coachman's whip could serve as judge, jury, and executioner. The public notice boards overflow with edicts, curfews, isolation zones, and punishments that read like medieval horoscopes. You slip past the notice, heart pounding, praying your name isn't next in the list scrawled in dark ink. A magistrate's scribe offers you employment transcribing decrees, promise protection, but only if you swear loyalty. You weigh the risk. A chance to dine on scraps in the guardhouse against the certainty of starving in your own home. Crowds press in as the magistrate unveils new health marks, branding irons to sear a symbol of compliance onto skin. The lines between keeper and captive blur, obedience becomes currency, and freedom, a distant rumour. You witness a wealthy widow buy an exemption scroll, her laughter echoing as she strides through barricades. Guards nudge starving peasants aside to let silk-robed officials pass unchallenged, their eyes glazed with entitlement. You recall whispers of a secret tunnel used by nobles to bypass checkpoints, an underground highway of privilege. The tension trembles in the air like flint before a spark. One misstep could ignite a riot or a deadly crackdown. At dusk, torches flame along the walls, marking off-limit zones where only the affluent roam freely. You sense the injustice in every flickering shadow, as power cloaks itself in the guise of protection. Back in your alley, the last warden departs, and you realize the true rulers of this plague are fear and hierarchy. For a moment, you savor the hush before nightfall, a fragile peace bought at the price of your neighbor's misery. It's politics, plague style. Whoever holds the pen and the purse writes history first. And you thought taxes were brutal, because nothing solidifies authority quite like issuing curfews while your own kin cough in the courtyard. The coarse weave of your homespun tunic scratches against your collarbone, each movement a reminder of the rough cloth pressed to your skin. Beneath its fibers, your skin prickles at the slightest gust of wind, as if the fabric itself conspires to irritate your nerves. You run your fingers over the ridges of a weathered wooden door, the grain splintering at the touch and leaving faint cuts. The iron hinge squeals, cold and unyielding, sending a jolt through your wrist every time you push it open. Bundles of worn rope coil at your feet, their stiff fibers clinging to wisps of leftover debris. You brush against a barrel rimmed with rust, the flaky metal flaking off onto your palms. A damp wool cloak slips from a nearby peg, waterlogged from last night's rain and heavy as a leaden blanket. The weight presses down on your shoulders, pinching the skin beneath until you feel rooted to the spot. Every touch here is a lesson in discomfort, each surface eager to remind you how far luxury has fallen. You steady yourself on a rough stone windowsill, its cold surface seeping through your trousers straight into your bones. A basket of rags, meant for patching, lies at your feet. The threads fray as you grasp them, creating a cloud of lint. The flicker of torchlight casts the walls in sharp relief, making every nook's uneven plaster stand out like a scar. You grip the handle of a ceramic jug, its glazed finish smooth until the narrow neck squeezes against your palm. Turning it, your knuckles meet the gritty rim of chipped clay, jarring your arm with an unwelcome tremor. You press your cheek to a window pane smeared with grime, the glass pitting against your skin like fine sandpaper. When you withdraw, your face is streaked with dust, the faint print of the cold pane still visible. A surge of relief washes over you upon sinking into a wooden chair, its worn seat finally lending support. Slight reprieves emerge in the simplest gestures, though even rest feels rough and uneven. You flex your fingers and feel the sting at each joint, as if the chill has turned your limbs to brittle wood. A patch of moss clings to the threshold outside, its velvety surface damp but inexplicably comforting to the touch. Your belt buckle, once gleaming, now presses cold iron into your waist, the metal biting through layers of fabric. You trail your fingertips along the coarse hem of your tunic, noticing a tiny tickle of lice you hadn't felt before. You brush them away with a frustrated swipe, a futile gesture against a world crawling with irritants. The sun's warmth on your back feels miraculous, as it briefly softens the edges of your discomfort. You lean on a stone pillar, its surface rough and cool, grounding you in the moment. A stray scrap of velvet fallen from a noble's sleeve brushes against your boot, whispering of worlds beyond your reach. Even a thread of luxury can tease hope amid the relentless grind of hardship. You lift a heavy clay pot from the ground. Its bulk reminds you of the burdens carried by every household here. The handle scoops into your hand like a stubborn claw, demanding every ounce of strength you have. Setting it down, you notice the sweat beneath your sleeves where the fabric clings to your skin. You tighten the leather strap on a water skin that rubs and squeaks with every breath you take. The squeal of leather against leather echoes like a tiny lament in the hushed alley. You slide a rough blanket free from its bundle, the wool pulling threads from your fingers as you unfold it. The texture is prickly and unwieldy, making you long for even a scrap of fine linen. You press the blanket to your cheek, only to wince at the scratch of coarse fibers against your face. Textures may be harsh here, but each sensation reminds you you're alive and, well, mostly functional. You rub your palms together, feeling the grit that accumulates like fine dust from the street. The clasp of a simple bag digs into your forearm, its metal teeth biting through the worn leather. You brace against the weight of a shovel slung over your shoulder, its wooden haft leaving a red line across your arm. The cold steel blade's edge brushes your sleeve, a reminder of the tools both of survival and despair. You pause to run your fingertip along festooned rope lines, meant for hauling, marveling at their stubborn resilience. When you tug, a snarl of fibers catches in your sleeve, yanking your arm backward in a brief shock. You take a steadying breath, noting how even the simplest objects demand a silent negotiation. Hardly a spa day, but at least you know exactly how everything feels, because nothing says luxury like negotiating with a sack of grain. A damp sea breeze carried the faint sweetness of spilled wine from the Genoese galleys, a remnant of hastily abandoned cargo. The salt tang of ocean spray mingled uneasily with the stench of unburied corpses lashed to the hull. A low rumble of waves against weathered wood set a rhythmic pulse that deepened the sense of encroaching dread. Dark stains mottled the deck as stagnant water pooled where the infected had collapsed. The air tasted metallic, as if the sea itself had turned sour with the breath of the condemned. Seasick merchants clutched wooden buckets, their faces pale as they swallowed the tangy vapors rising from the plague-ridden hold. A sip of brackish water left an acrid aftertaste that lingered on parched tongues. Blankets damp from salt spray lay draped over benches, offering minimal shelter from the pervasive odor of decay. The voyage carried more than exotic spices. It bore an invisible menace that tinted every flavor with unease. At the harbor, sailors unhitched roped bundles as if handling fragile treasures, unaware that each crate might conceal a sleeping plague. Wooden barrels of wine cracked open, unleashing waves of fermenting grapes that fluttered on the breeze like sickly perfume. Dockworkers gingerly sampled half-empty flasks, the sticky sweetness momentarily soothing the clamor of fear. The aroma of tar from freshly sealed hulls fought a losing battle against the heavy musk of death. A merchant chief offered guests crusty bread soaked in rancid oil to fortify their weakened spirits. The brittle crumbs crumbled under cautious teeth, each bite sending a spark of bitterness along the tongue. Exotic spices in small cloth sacks promised relief, but their heady scent only served to highlight how little they could mask. A stray whiff of peppercorn tickled nostrils, reminding onlookers that even distant lands could not sanitize the plague's presence. Spices and wine were mere bandages on a wound too deep for any earthly balm. As the first bodies were heaved ashore in Caffa, a gust of wind carried the nauseating perfume of rot into the city gates. In the market square, unripe fruit emitted a sour squeak when pressed, its juice a pale echo of healthy harvests. Passers-by recoiled from baskets of withered grapes, their skins shriveled like parchment manuscripts. A vendor offered cloves to ward off the miasma. The pungent aroma stung nasal passages until tears blurred vision. Attendants dipped cloth strips into vinegar barrels, pressing them gently over trembling lips. That sharp bite of acetic acid offered little comfort beyond a momentary reprieve from the omnipresent stench. Unsealed crypts leaked a musty odor that clung to hair and garments, as if the city itself were exhaling its grief. Freshly painted wooden shutters gave a fleeting hope of cleanliness that dissolved upon contact with the fetid air. In Caffa, every breath recalled the pulse of death carried on infected cargo. A broken amphora spilled olive oil across sun-warmed stones, its smooth richness overshadowed by the dank scent of plague pits. Boats laden with grain alighted on the quay, their hulls coated in a dark patina that betrayed concealed horrors below. A sailor unclasped his water skin, and the sour tang of tainted supply left him gagging. Wax-sealed letters from Venetian traders crackled as they were opened, unleashing the faint but unmistakable odor of mortality. The crisp ink on parchment mingled with the low hum of fear that coalesced into a tangible air. Even the simplest meal of salt cod mash seemed tainted by unseen spores drifting overhead. A cook clucked in dismay as her stew curdled, the liquid separating under the weight of silent panic. The lingering taste of stale barley porridge became a bitter emblem of a world unraveling. Each flavor and scent in the port city carried the memory of the dead, spilled into the streets. Sailors scrubbed decks with vinegar water, a desperate ritual that left the planks damp and the air stinging. They wore cloth masks doused in aromatic herbs, their nostrils filled with faint hope rather than sanitizing might. The bitter whisper of wormwood in the cloth offered solace that slipped away with every breath. Harbor lights flickered over slick stones, slick with brine and despair. The pungency of smoke from signal fires clashed with the brine-laden breeze, forming an acrid veil. A final blast of trumpet echoed across silent waters, marking the point of no return for many. Night descended with a hush that tasted of fear and unspoken farewells. Under a moon veiled by haze, the air settled into a cold stillness that pressed every scent deep into memory. Even now, the salt and rot of those waters remain etched in history, a testament to plague's unwelcome arrival. Moisture-laden air hung heavy, as if the sea itself mourned the lives it unwittingly transported. A whisper of clove and decay still lingers in the annals of time. And thus, Europe's slow march toward devastation began with a taste too bitter to swallow. At least the spice merchants had a memorable debut. After all, nothing says "welcome home" quite like a barrel of death arriving at your doorstep. In city councils cloaked in candlelight, patricians gathered to weigh measures that might spare their own skin. Scrolls of precedent lay unfurled across long oak tables, their inked lines guiding decisions born of desperation. A hush settled over the chamber as magistrates debated sealing off neighborhoods, a choice between order and isolation. Noble voices rose and fell in measured tones, each syllable carrying the weight of potential salvation or ruin. The soft glow of lanterns carved shadows on stone walls, lending dignity to proceedings steeped in dread. Envoys from Florence delivered sealed letters, promising safe passage for merchants prepared to pay the right toll. Their embroidered cloaks rustled like autumn leaves, a reminder of wealth's subtle sway in times of crisis. As quills scratched across parchment, alliances formed in ink would shape the fate of millions. In these solemn halls, every decree felt like a fragile promise, meant to protect, yet tinged with uncertainty. When the Genoese envoy pressed a satchel of gold forward, council elders exchanged furtive glances of calculated hope. Words of quarantine were weighed against the allure of commerce, each compromise leaving unspoken debts. A visiting ambassador from Venice extolled the benefits of temporary seclusion, soft-spoken counsel veiled in self-interest. Courtiers pressed forward, their silk sleeves brushing against carved banisters as they jockeyed for influence. Outside, the steady toll of church bells punctuated debates, a somber counterpoint to worldly negotiations. Some whispered of erecting wooden barricades at the city gates, an act both symbolic and strategic. Others cautioned that dividing streets would strand the vulnerable and sow seeds of unrest. Amid the tension, city scribes recorded every motion, their hands steady despite the tremor of urgency. Behind each proposal lay a tension between compassion and control, a delicate balance of mercy and might. Over in London, courtiers huddled in drafty chambers, maps spread before them like fragile mosaics. They traced the Thames's winding course, debating whether its waters could serve as a natural barrier. Proposals to halt all river traffic met resistance from merchant guilds whose livelihoods clung to trade. Beneath gilt-framed portraits, advisors argued that island status offered protection, if enforced with vigilance. In hushed tones they planned patrols along stone bridges, imagining watchmen as guardians of health. Royal decrees were drafted in flowing script, calling for isolation carts and nightly curfews. Yet scarce manpower meant those proclamations often remained ink on paper, unheeded in dimly lit alleys. Courtiers exchanged murmurs of frustration, torn between ideal policy and imperfect execution. Even in regal halls, the gulf between decree and reality yawned wide, illuminated by torchlight and tension. In distant Venice, the Doge convened a council beneath arched ceilings, their voices echoing like distant waves. Here, the lazaretti, quarantine islands, emerged from whispered advisories into solemn decrees. Gondoliers ferried officials to mortar-walled camps, their boats slicing through mist as silent as a prayer. Physicians in white cloaks inspected arrivals, their measured nods masking the turmoil of hope and fear. Festooned banners above the docks proclaimed safety for coin-bearing pilgrims, a barter both noble and dystopian. Ambassadors from Milan penned notes of condemnation, decrying these isolation measures as theatrical excess. Yet even critics conceded that Venice's stone fortresses held the line where open cities faltered. In portrait-lined chambers, the Doge himself signed edicts that would ripple across the continent. Power danced with prudence here, each signature an invocation of both authority and anxiety. Meanwhile, city councils in Genoa huddled once more, seeking to outmaneuver their rivals with harsher sanctions. Feudal lords offered troops to enforce closures, their banners snapping in the breeze like silent threats. In the Great Hall, the echo of armored boots beneath marble floors underscored the weight of martial law. A councilman argued for punitive charges against the non-compliant, an approach met with worried glances. The soft rustle of velvet gowns reminded all that law and luxury could intertwine in fragile harmony. As night fell, torches flickered across stone columns, casting policies into stark relief. Courtiers withdrew behind oaken doors, their decisions sealed under the hush of midnight. And in that quiet hour, the fate of cities hung between ink-stained hands and the silent plea of souls beyond the walls. Such is the paradox of power. To protect a realm, one must sometimes confine the very lives one seeks to save. Though, ironically, no decree ever cured a frightened heart. Thin leather gloves, softened by repeated dampening in harbour mist, slide over rough-hewn rope coils as sailors secure the plague-laden bales. The coarse texture of hemp sails scrapes across weathered knuckles when wind gusts tighten the rigging. Salt-crusted wood planks yield under boot heels, each step imprinting a fleeting echo of presence. A lieutenant's chainmail drapes with a metallic whisper, the overlapping rings pressing cool against forearms. The weight of that armor bears down like a concealed burden, reminding wearers of both duty and fragility. Underneath padded gambesons, quilted layers compress in tight succession, trapping warmth against chill sea breezes. Crest-embossed surcoats, once regal in velvet, now cling damp and heavy, their embroidery matte with salt stain. The jostle of wooden crates, laden with medical supplies, clinks rhythmically, each nudge reverberating along shuddering beams. Textures here speak of labor and foreboding, where every touch carries traces of preparation and unease. Silk ribbons binding official letters flutter unevenly against splintered tabletops, their fibers fraying at the edges. Wax seals crack with brittle resistance, crumbling into granular fragments under the firm press of a scribe's thumb. The smooth grain of cedar casks contrasts sharply with the jagged edges of hastily sawn boards. Fingers glide over faded ivory inlays on a captain's chest, their polished surfaces dulled by salt air. The heft of an iron-bound ledger demands careful balance, its pages thick and wax-stained. Linen cloths, stained with vinegar and herb oils, cling stubbornly to rough stone walls. A chestnut-hued bridle, its leather supple from months of use, leaves a faint imprint on bare skin. The spiked protrusions of a pike rest cold against the palm, a reminder of violence tempered by necessity. Amid these contrasting pressures, smooth and jagged, cold and pliant, each surface tells a story of endurance. Hand-forged nails bite into weathered planks as boards are reinforced for quarantine enclosures. A surgeon's shears, with steel blades etched by repeated sharpening, catch faint glimmers of torchlight. Woolen blankets rolled tight carry the faint scent of burnt oak, absorbed through countless firelit nights. A courier's satchel, its canvas patchworked in haste, drags across stone floors, rousing echoes of hurried passage. The firm resistance of a secured hatch door yields only after a measured series of turns. A hemp rope tether, knotted in precise patterns, presses into palm creases with every haul. The inner side of a captain's cloak, lined in wool, brushes warm against the neck in sudden relief. Rusted clasps release with a reluctant creak from a barrel lid, revealing the grainy contents within. These sensations, friction and release, warmth and chill, unfold like chapters in a tactile chronicle. A medical chest, its oak planks ring-bound with iron hoops, feels surprisingly light when hoisted. Parchment bundles tied with fraying twine shed tiny filaments on calloused fingertips. Coarse straw mattresses sag beneath shifting weights, bristles pressing uncomfortably into backbones. The narrow lead-lined pipe at a quarantine station offers a slick, metallic taste under ungloved lips. A guard's gauntlet, layered with hardened leather, clamps snugly around the wrist in silent solidarity. Velvet cushions in the captain's cabin, once plush, have flattened into firm discs over countless voyages. A scrivener's quill, its feather spine stiff with ink residue, brushes lightly against parchment. The elbowed corners of sealed edicts press against chests as couriers stand at attention. Each tactile nuance captures both ceremony and strain, reflecting lives interwoven with duty and dread. The tang of salted cordage seeps through gloves, leaving traces on sweat-moistened palms. A belt studded with brass rivets weighs heavily at the waist, each buckle resonating with subtle authority. The underside of a helm, lined with flakes of rust, imprisons hair in a gritty embrace. A scholar's desk, carved from cherry wood, offers a surprisingly smooth plane for inked proclamations. A lantern's hoop handle warms gently in gloved hands, a small comfort against damp stone walls. Staves leaning against courtyard walls bear the gouges of splintered wood, where caution turned to haste. A stack of parchment maps shimmers under lamplight, each sheet cool to the touch and heavy with potential. Iron grates over cell windows vibrate with distant cries, their gridiron pattern etching final farewells to fingertips. Surfaces may be cold and unyielding, but each tactile detail anchors memory in a world adrift. The uneven texture of cobblestones underfoot echoes the uneven path of destiny forged by ink and iron. A closing bolt snaps shut with a definite thunk, sealing both hope and anxiety within trembling confines. In a world defined by texture, even the roughest grain becomes a measure of resilience. Under the hush of dawn, leather-gloved hands cradle weathered jawbones excavated from damp earth. Each tooth is a time capsule of microbial whispers imprinted across centuries. Gentle taps of a clean scalpel chip away at mineralized sediment hiding microscopic clues. Through magnifying lenses, lab technicians coax pale strands of DNA from fragile enamel. Those fine threads unravel into patterns that speak of plague strains long past. In softly lit laboratories, sterile petri dishes stand ready to host a revival of ancient genes. Pipettes hover with deliberate precision, transferring minute samples into preservation vials. The faint scent of disinfectant mingles with the cool, recycled air of the analysis room. A hush settles as the process shifts from field to bench, the steady rhythm of lab work offering quiet reassurance. Each methodical measurement feels like tracing the outline of a ghost's last breath. Advanced sequencing machines hum quietly, decoding nucleotides one base at a time. Raw data streams across screens, forming genetic blueprints for a bacterium that shaped history. Bioinformaticians translate those sequences into evolutionary tales, mapping ancient lineages. Subtle genetic mutations reveal how Yersinia pestis adapted to medieval hosts. Patterns emerge that hint at strengths and vulnerabilities of centuries-old microbes. Researchers pore over alignment charts, guided by the gentle glow of computer monitors. A sense of calm focus pervades the room, as if each discovery rocks the mind into serene wonder. The dance between microscope and sequencer unfolds with the quiet assurance of bedtime rituals. Each alignment score reads like a verse in a lullaby of microbial memory. Fingerpads brush softly against touchscreens to adjust reaction conditions. Pipette tips click into place like musical notes in a hushed nocturne. Cool metal of sample racks gleams under gentle LEDs, lending an otherworldly shimmer. Scientists document every variable in neat columns, their pens gliding smoothly over paper logs. Gloves snap on and off, a reassuring rhythm echoing soft footsteps in an empty hall. In occasional moments of stillness, the lab feels as gentle as a whisper beneath the earth. Each extracted fragment amplifies into a chorus of microscopic voices long silent. Those voices trace pathways of contagion that once swept across continents. Sequence variants reveal how some communities faced the plague with quiet resistance. Labs become sanctuaries where past and present merge in a shared pursuit of knowledge. As the final readouts appear, data points align like stars in a midnight sky. Each plotted graph comforts with its orderly glow, guiding understanding deeper. Collaborative meetings discuss strain similarities found in graves from Bavaria to Caffa. Gentle voices reflect on how tiny mutations shaped destinies of entire villages. Research teams exchange findings with soft gratitude, mindful of the lives behind each sample. The tactile act of handling aged bone carries a solemn tenderness. Brushes dust away soil grains with the care of turning a cherished page. Every fragment preserved is a gesture of respect toward the souls resting below. Scientists muse on how modern medicine owes its roots to these silent testimonies. In this tranquil fusion of archaeology and genetics, the past whispers softly to the present. Layers of earth and lab work converge in a calm tapestry of discovery. And as the last sequence aligns, the story of medieval suffering unfolds with compassionate clarity. Who would have thought that centuries-old plague DNA could feel as intimate as a whispered bedtime secret? Even dusty bones can lull the mind into a hush of wonder. Under a silver dawn, shallow trenches gape in the chalky London earth. Trowels and mattocks alternate with gentle brushes, each tool offering its own tactile message. Layers of compacted soil yield to reveal neat rows of coffinless interments. Collarbones arc like fragile bridges against the damp, pressed earth. Fingers trace the sinewy grooves of femurs, mapping contours set long ago. Soft bristled brushes whisper against skulls, coaxing away stubborn flecks of chalk. Each clattering bone slipping into padded trays produces a muted percussion. The cold steel of excavation tools transmits a crisp shiver across calloused palms. In this moment, method settles into mindfulness. As work and contemplation entwine, patterns of placement emerge, guiding the mind toward careful hypotheses. Trowel lines carve pathways through history, defining clusters of resting forms. Bodies lie in alternating head-to-foot alignments, a silent testament to hurried burial rites. In some areas, double rows hint at communal stacking under time's duress. Soil compaction leaves impressions that whisper of weighty burdens once carried above. Subtle undulations in the earthmark where coffins might have been spared. Small fragments of textile cling to bone, a muted echo of fabric that once swaddled the dead. Archaeologists document every nuance in precise sketches and field logs. Careful not to rush, they balance urgency with reverence for lives entwined here. Transitioning from dirt to data, the team gathers around illuminated maps. Colored pins mark clusters, ages, and even possible familial groupings. Epidemiologists consult with osteologists, cross-referencing lesion patterns on rib bones. Minute pitting on thoracic surfaces suggests fevered torments borne by so many. Absence of defensive wounds indicates victims succumbed before despair could harden. Age distributions reveal disproportionate losses among young adults and the elderly. Occasional intact grave goods, beads, rings, offer whispers of personal identity. Those small tokens are handled with gloved care, their textures telling stories. Soil samples from hand-clasped fossils promise future environmental insights. In hushed tones, researchers reflect on the hum of distant breweries still drifting across East Smithfield. Pause invites a moment of unity between past and present, a respectful breath. Findings coalesce into narratives weighing science and empathy in equal measure. Lab assistants ferry trays of cleaned bone to adjoining laboratories. There, domestic beetles finish delicate cleaning, nibbling residues without damage. Hum of their tiny mandibles blends with the heartbeat of quiet instrumentation. Scholars pore over tomography scans that reveal internal bone microstructures. Slice by slice, digital reconstructions resurrect cranial vaults long vanished. Cold surfaces of scanners contrast with the warmth of human curiosity driving each scan. Patterns of porosity yield clues to nutritional stresses endured before death. Each digital slice brings new clarity to the communal eruption that was the Black Death. Reflecting on the pit's silent patterns, teams plan further digs with measured care. The earth here remains a patient storyteller, offering insights to those who listen. Even in loss, a certain beauty emerges from the choreography of burial. Layers of soil and bone compose an unspoken eulogy for lives uprooted. Quiet collaboration across disciplines, craft, stories, more enduring than any coffin. Mapping mass graves thus becomes an act of gentle remembrance. In every measured scoop and scan, the dead guide us toward compassion. Sometimes the quietest voices are buried in plain sight. Cold stone tablet rests on a velvet-lined tray. Its rough carvings worn smooth at the fingertips. Archaeologist's gloved palm presses gently against the inscription, feeling centuries of weathered grooves. Nearby, a linen bundle cradles fragments of dyed fabric, its coarse threads tickling fingertips. The slight give of padded cushions eases the weight of fragile textiles as they unfurl. Underneath, ceramic shards produce a soft clink like distant raindrops on a tiled courtyard. Metallic clasps from rusted pouches catch the light, their jagged edges cold against gloved skin. Hand lenses transmit the tactile contrast between gritty earth and polished obsidian beads. Soft suede pouches release faint dust motes with each careful turn of a wrist. Each exploration pause offers a moment to center thoughts on the centuries-old touch. Wooden handles of excavation brushes warm under calloused fingers, guiding strokes across weathered bone. Soil granules slip through gaps in fingertips. Granular whispers of ancient burial grounds. A leather-bound field notebook yields under thumb pressure, its pages bearing impressions of hurried notes. Smooth ceramic bowls cradling small finds invite gentle lifting, their rims familiar in shape if not in age. Shards of painted pottery reveal slightly raised glaze lines, a subtle texture of medieval artisanship. A steel trowel's broad face conveys reassuring heft, its balanced weight a constant companion. Cold steel against bone echoes like a heartbeat, reassuring in its steady presence. Stone mortar fragments rattle softly in a satchel as they move between labs. Pens trace neat glyphs onto waterproof tags. The tips drag a satisfying whisper. Even the zip of a plastic sample bag carries a crisp snap that punctuates focused work. In one corner, bundles of wrapped textiles emit a gentle swish when shifted. Fingers coax open a clay flask, revealing a smooth interior that contrasts its fractured exterior. Bone fragments, arranged on foam, press into contours that match their original life forms. Each piece fits the foam block with snug precision, mimicking the embrace of ancient flesh. Pale ceramic lamps, their curved surfaces still warm to the touch, suggest midnight vigils long past. Fine copper hairpins, once sleek, cling to velvet pads with a barely audible sigh. Magnetic stirrers hum beneath vials, the vibration felt softly through the bench. Petri dish lids slide open with a quiet exhale, inviting the next chapter of microscopic discovery. Even the hum of climate control registers as a subtle vibration in the soles of shoes. Brushes rest atop jars of glycerin, their bristles stiff yet pliable under prodding gloves. Each shift from excavation to lab supplies a new vocabulary of touch. Clay tablets yield dusty resistance before giving way to delicate indentations. The ridged backs of combs unearthed from a grave emit a low hum when rubbed. Layers of leather pouches open with soft creaks, each fold a tactile narrative. Porous stone fragments absorb moisture from fingertips, reminding scientists of the passage of time. In these interactions, the past is made tangible and immediate. The calm focus of each touch resonates like a soothing chorus in the mind. With each measured exploration, the weight of history settles into the hands. Through this delicate choreography, the artifacts reveal their secrets one textured whisper at a time. The final gesture of closing a display case snaps gently into place, a soft punctuation on the day's work. Nightfall descends outside the lab windows, the glass cool under resting palms. Tools are laid to rest, their surfaces cleansed and ready for tomorrow. Gloves are peeled off with a soft rustle, leaving bare skin to absorb the day's revelations. Each fingerprint lift is preserved in a log, a tactile record of where the past met present. In the quiet clamp of a drawer, the day's findings sleep beneath the reassuring weight of stone and glass. When the past is held in your hands, discovery becomes a gentle journey of touch. Marble courtyards gleamed under sharpening sunlight, fountains whispering against mosaic tiles. Silk awnings fluttered above stone benches, casting dappled shadows on ivory walls. Perfumed waters from rose petals filled shallow basins, releasing delicate floral trails. In the private lazaretti, stone wards glowed pale under lantern-lit arches. Venetian merchants paced behind walls carved smooth by generations of service. Servants brought trays of spiced wine sweetened with honey, its warmth a comfort against fear. Suites of heated chambers boasted tiled floors warmed beneath glowing braziers. Bronze candelabras flickered their reflections across polished marble. A hush of solemn respect settled as affluent patients awaited fate behind iron gates. Privilege and dread interwove in silent acknowledgement of vulnerability. Diplomatic envoys in embroidered doublets negotiated safe passage from the plague's reach. Gold threads traced intricate patterns on brocaded vests, a constant reminder of status. Patrician councils debated isolation versus commerce in velvet-lined rooms. Edicts were inscribed on vellum scrolls, seals of wax bearing proud doge crests. Debates over rationed spices mirrored larger disputes over lives and livelihoods. Every decree bore the weight of both reputation and responsibility. Leather-bound tomes closed with muted thuds, signaling strategic shifts behind mahogany desks. Murmured alliances formed beneath frescoed ceilings, poised between self-preservation and solidarity. Faint tendrils of incense lingered in secluded alcoves, guiding exhausted courtiers toward extended vigils. Soft tapestries absorbed anxious footsteps, muffling echoes in private chambers. Servant pages offered trays of sugared almonds and candied citrus, a sweet reprieve from dread. Priceless porcelain cups held bittersweet tea brewed with rare imported herbs. Courtiers reclined on velvet divans, cushioned in muted tones of lavender and gold. Gilded mirrors reflected solemn countenances framed by jeweled collars. A single lute strummed by a muted musician offered gentle reeds of distraction. Murmur of distant bells reminded attendees of both chapel rites and passing hours. In garden mazes, hedges formed labyrinthine passages for solitary reflection. Marble statues gazed over silent gatherings, their stone eyes offering timeless witness. The scent of boxwood mingled with freshly cut grass, grounding ephemeral courtly fears. At dusk, lanterns lit with slow-burning tallow-cast amber halos across manicured lawns. Some nobles sought solace in alchemical tinctures, convinced gold-laced potions warded off disease. Others wore hermetic talismans engraved with protector saints' names in minute script. Apothecaries crafted elaborate perfumes infused with mercury, a potent gamble on health. Ritual baths, scented with frankincense and myrrh, promised both purity and panic relief. Even the most learned courtiers surrendered to gilded hope over empirical proof. Behind ornate gates, privilege clashed with paralysis in uneasy truce. Torchlit corridors above isolation wards glowed as beacons of both refuge and exclusion. Feathered cushions in chaise lounges offered an illusion of calm against the dusk chill. Fireplace embers glowed in stone hearths, offering warmth that momentarily outshone anxieties. Soft clatter of iron grills echoed in moonlit corridors, reminding all that wealth could not erase fear. Lantern-lit carriages rolled across slick cobblestones, bearing nobles to sanitized retreats. Quiet servants moved with choreographed precision, their steps preserving fragile poise. Embroidered curtains swayed against polished walls, an opulent lullaby in the night. Ornate maps charted both known realms and forbidden quarantine zones. Even beneath silk robes and velvet capes, a subtle tremor of unease lingered like a distant echo. Money could buy a pillow, but not peace of mind. Candlelight gleamed softly against carved oak paneling, casting gentle shadows across vaulted ceilings. Silk hangings swayed faintly in the evening breeze, their muted patterns offering quiet comfort. In private salons, council members reclined on brocade cushions stitched with gold thread. Soft footfalls on plush rugs echoed down secluded corridors. Perfumed oils diffused through crystal burners, mingling lavender and cedar into a tranquil haze. Servants moved with hushed efficiency, their folds of linen rustling like distant wind through reeds. Delicate goblets of rosehip cordial rested on silver trays, dew-laden ice cubes chiming like distant peals. Gilded calligraphy on invitations announced exclusive gatherings beyond reinforced gates. In these hushed spaces, opulence softened the tension between isolation and intimacy. Ornate latticed windows overlooked manicured gardens, their patterns dimly lit by moonlight. Opal insets on wooden screens glimmered with the milky gleam of muted fireflies. Sleek marble baths stood ready, warmed by subterranean hypercausts humming low beneath tiled floors. Carved marble steps led into pools infused with rosemary sprigs, the water reflecting lantern halos. Servants in powdered wigs offered trays of candied violets and soft cheese, a gentle nod to simpler pleasures. Soft murmur of harp strings drifted from an adjacent chamber, each note a whispered lullaby. Velvet-clad figures exchanged quiet confidences, voices barely rising above the hush of silk. Through latticed doors, distant chanting evoked solemn communion with a higher realm. Between luxurious simplicity and slow, deliberate rituals, every gesture felt suffused with purpose. Behind heavy drapes, trial vials of amber elixirs were arrayed on polished stone altars. Pale liquid within glowed faintly, hinting at secrets both medicinal and mythical. Apothecary scholars in trimmed beards sniffed distillations of myrrh and frankincense. Each inhalation carried the promise of purification and the weight of ancient tradition. Copper-studded journals lay open, inscribed with celestial diagrams and alchemical annotations. A gentle tapping of quills punctuated the soft crackle of burning sage. Porcelain mortars ground rare spices to powder, their rhythmic turning a measured meditation. The hush of scholarly focus contrasted with the muted opulence of the surrounding chambers. This delicate balance between scientific curiosity and ceremonial verse defined every vaulted hall. In moonlit courtyards, Statues of patron saints gazed serenely through wrought iron grills. Ivy-threaded columns bore witness to nightly vigils beneath painted frescoes. Scholars and nobles alike traced fingerpaths along stone reliefs depicting healing miracles. Soft glints of moonlight on stained glass teased colors across arched alcoves. Low hum of distant church bells punctuated the night air, each toll a reminder of time's passage. From behind lattices, muffled gatherings of prayers offered solace to the wealthy afflicted. In these shadowed enclosures, faith and wealth intertwined in subtle harmony. Every whispered incantation seemed to soothe both body and spirit. Within these layered sanctuaries of faith and privilege, hope shimmered in every muted echo. Drawing chambers held ledgers of chapel offerings and charitable dues. Monks in coarse robes moved among velvet thrones, bridging austere devotion and lavish ceremony. Candles in alabaster sconces dripped luminous trails onto wooden floors below. Servants distributed thin woolen blankets to nobles who shivered against the courtyard chill. Warmed by both faith and furnace, guests found solace in minimal discomfort. Gilded reliquaries, housing fragments of saints' bones, gleamed softly on moss-lined pedestals. A hush of wonder accompanied each veneration, uniting highborn and humble in shared reverence. As night deepened, the opulent estate settled into a lull of hushed breathing and distant prayer. Through candlelit corridors and arching cloisters, the night whispered of both human frailty and enduring grace. Even within veiled sanctums and fine tapestries, the subtle tremor of uncertainty lingered beneath soft silences. Yet for a moment, wealth and ritual wove a tranquil cocoon against the restless dark. When gold and faith entwine, even the grandest castles can cradle quiet hope. Under tremulous torchlight, penitent figures processed through cobbled streets. Their robes brushed night air in unison, fabric whispering against ancient stones. Staffs, topped with cloth-wrapped scourges, swung with measured rhythm. Leather lashes snapped softly, each stroke a muted echo stirring collective penance. Lanterns caught motes of dust in their glow, illuminating pale profiles bowed in devotion. The distant toll of church bells marked each measured step, a lullaby of contrition. Chanting voices rose in low waves, blending prayer and penance into a soothing hum. Dripping wax from handheld candles pooled in ornate iron cups, solidifying in quiet drips. In this dance of self-affliction, faith and fear intertwined in tranquil cadence. Chronicles note that some courtiers observed the flagellants from behind shuttered windows. Velvet curtains muted lantern glow, revealing only silhouettes in studded corridors. A hush accompanied distant chants, as if the night itself were praying. Bloodless stigmata were imprinted on cloth binding rather than flesh, preserving gentility. Physicians in powdered beards watched with scholarly detachment, documenting ritual cures. Quills scratched against parchment, recording observations for future generations. In private alcoves, clergy debated the efficacy of corporeal purification. Some argued that spiritual remedy outweighed any physical ailment. Others favored herbal distillations over ritual penance, citing milder effects. Thus, ritual and reason coexisted in genteel tension across wealthy enclaves. As outbreaks waned, patrician estates thrummed with calculated resilience. Landlords sealed gates to their manors, relying on private wells and stocked pantries. Servant inventories logged barrels of salted meat and sacks of durable grains. Gilded harvest celebrations replaced public feasts, with offerings confined to inner courts. Merchant caravans brought exotic spices as symbols of post-plague prosperity. Trade networks reconfigured under new alliances born from shared adversity. Ledgers brimmed with entries for wool, cloth, and wine destined for far-off markets. Aristocrats invested in reinforced storehouses, safeguarding commodities from spoil. Interest in agrarian innovation grew, with experimental crop rotations quietly trialed. In the calm after crisis, wealth consolidation sowed the seeds of economic revival. Noble families commissioned airy halls with tall windows to welcome fresh breezes. Artisans crafted ornate iron grates for ventilation, merging utility with elegance. Investments shifted towards artisan guilds, fueling a renaissance of craftsmanship. Patronage of painters and sculptors became both cultural gesture and status symbol. The insurance of merchant ventures emerged in rudimentary forms, spreading risk. Banking houses extended letters of credit, enabling ventures beyond local confines. Some dukes endowed hospitals, their munificence doubling as public relations. These charitable gestures reinforced social hierarchies even amidst shared loss. Land treaties were redrafted to account for consolidated estates and diminished labor. Enclosures of common fields quietly accelerated, reshaping rural economies. Thus, privilege translated crisis into opportunity for those with cautious foresight. Even amid solemn memory, ambition and renewal blossomed in refined courts. Estates once threatened by pestilence emerged as epicenters of trade and culture. The melding of opulence and innovation charted a path toward tomorrow's prosperity. In sumptuous halls, survivors toasted to life's fragile promise with candied grapes. And so, for the affluent, plague became both cautionary tale and catalyst for grand rebirth. When fear becomes currency, the wealthy mint fortunes from the ashes. As night settles beyond castle walls, memory of penitent processions and lavish escapes drifts gently into slumber. Through whispered chants and candlelit feasts, history's grand contrasts weave a tapestry of resilience. The legacy of both ritual fervor and strategic foresight lingers like a lullaby across centuries. May these reflections on devotion, extravagance, and renewal soothe the mind into peaceful repose. Let the quiet echo of flails and the soft glow of braziers guide thoughts toward restful calm. If you haven't yet fallen asleep, leave a comment so I know who stayed up longer than I have. Until next time, sleep well.